My name is Valenta, and I'm going to talk about JavaFX in general for a while, and then I will focus more on the deployment of JavaFX. This means I will show you a way how to prepare your applications in JavaFX for easy distribution and easy presentation of them to your customers and your clients and users. Yeah, first of all, I am not an Oracle spokesperson, so don't trust me anything. I won't say anything confidential, but don't trust me anything. The agenda will be like this. As I said, I will talk about JavaFX in general. I will show you some cool demos written in JavaFX and snippets of code. I will try to convince you that JavaFX is a great tool for you for developing graphical rich applications. And then most of the time we will spend describing the deployment tools that comes with JavaFX SDK and the way you can use them and make yourself more productive. Yeah. In general, JavaFX is a toolkit, it's a Java library, and it's meant to make your life as a developer of graphical applications easier. It not only contains graphical items you can put in your application, but it has also internal features that help you to connect these graphical items with the internals of your program. So for example, when you are developing and you need to connect a value of an internal variable to something visible on the screen, let's say a text or a combo box or anything, you can do this in one line of code, and this really eases your experience as a JavaFX programmer. Furthermore, JavaFX contains media support, so you can play your clips, sounds, videos very easily, and it is hardware accelerated, so on your devices and also on desktops which support hardware acceleration, you can use this and make the user experience even more fluent or fast. The architecture is as is shown here. The important thing is that the JDK APIs and libraries, they go all the way up, and your Java application can use them. This means that you can use all third-party tools or whatever you need from Java ecosystem in your applications. So you are not limited to the JavaFX only. You can use whatever the other developers prepared for you, as you would in a regular Java application. Yeah, this is the full Java API access is what I just described. The binding support, it's the feature of connecting any two elements in your program together using one line of code. I will show you an example later on. We have a collections extension in JavaFX which works with the binding, so you can make a collection like a list or a map observable by another variable in your program. When someone or something changes the content of a list, another routine can be immediately notified and react accordingly. Animation support, it's a core feature of JavaFX because it's focused on rich or on visually rich applications full of animations. We have multi-touch support for devices that support multi-touch, like tablets and stuff. UI controls are prepared in JavaFX for you, which are quite customizable, so you can alter them to fit your application look and feel. Layouts and canvas support is also useful. Layouts help you design applications that behave correctly when you resize the window and stuff like that. In Canvas, you can draw whatever you want. The typical JavaFX application is based on a scene graph, which means that the application is designed in a tree-like structure. The root of the tree is your scene, and below the scene you can have the various visual components of your application, like various UI controls or rectangles, circles, and other graphical elements. They can be nested in each other, so you can manipulate with them conveniently. JavaFX is not only the language and the library, it has a whole bunch of other products connected with it, like the FXML and Scene Builder application. The Scene Builder application help you design your UI in JavaFX. It works like in good old Delphi or C++ Builder, where you just drag and drop your elements and you export them in a form of FXML language, and you can use this FXML file in your when you are programming the application to just connect the pieces of code to the UI controls you have created there. WebView is a special component that allows you to show web pages in your application, including all JavaScript and ActiveScript and whatever. Even the JavaScript variables can be called from JavaFX, so you can interconnect between JavaFX and JavaScript. This can be handy in some cases. We have Swing interoperability there, so you can combine Swing and JavaFX components in one application. Yeah, 2D and 3D support, including effects, can be also used to enhance the experience of your application. Hardware accelerated graphics, I've talked about that. Media engine, and the last point is corresponding to the deployment we will be talking about. I will show you more in detail later. It means that you can package your application including the VM, so this way you will send the application with the VM to your clients and customers, and they don't have to deal with the separate VM download. Plus you are certain that they will run the application on the version of the VM you bundle it with. You don't need to deal with some concerns that shouldn't be in Java, but everybody knows that Java changes from version to version. Yeah. I will show you a JavaFX ensemble, which is a quite huge application written by JavaFX engineers to present what is JavaFX. In JavaFX ensemble, on the left side you see elements of almost all items that can be put into the JavaFX program, and you can not only see how they look like, but you can also examine the source code of them and immediately use these snippets in your program. So this way, if you, for example, want to know how to do a line chart, you see the line chart, you can check how does it behave when you insert or remove data items, and you can also examine the source code and copy it, which is quite handy. You can see that it's not that long, thanks to JavaFX and its support. Only a few lines of code will do this quite nice graph, I would say, including the animation when adding points. Yeah, we have area charts as well. Not only charts, but other controls as well, like this. Yeah. Another example I have prepared here is the example of Swing interoperability. Here we have mixed application. The upper part with the graph is JavaFX, and the table below is in Swing. And you can see that if I edit the table here, it immediately changes the graph. All this animation is done automatically in JavaFX. You can, of course, customize it, but I think the graphs are quite nice example of JavaFX. I can even show you how easy it is to develop JavaFX in NetBeans, for example. This is a new project in JavaFX. This is what gets generated if you select new project, a JavaFX application. This is what you get, and it can be immediately run and should say hello world. If we wanted to add some animation into this static scene, I can show you how easy it is. To add an animation, we need a timeline. It will be just few lines of code. Let's do it final because we will need it later. The concept of animation in JavaFX is done in a way that you need a timeline that you will start when you want it to run the animation, and the timeline has a series of keyframes which are automatically evaluated along the time the animation is running. So we need to create a keyframe and insert it into the timeline. And to add a keyframe, we need a key value, which is a component of keyframe. Writable value is a concept in JavaFX, and it means that it's a property of an object or of an UI component which is going to be animated. In this way, I would like to make the button, for example, to rotate, to look like rotating, and I will do it by changing the scale X property. Scale X we'll see. It will be rotation of the button. And we will want to make it value -1. Now we will finally construct the keyframe. And add this keyframe into the timeline. And here in the handle, after the button is pressed, we will say the timeline to play and run the program. Hopefully it will work. And here when I press the button, it should rotate. Yeah, you see, this is what those 4 lines did. So this is JavaFX. I hope you are interested. This was the more funny part of this presentation, because deployment is not that graphically rich, but it's quite important, and the experience that your users will get from your application really starts when it is first running, and while the client is downloading it, and the first time the application is run is very important, and the deployment tools like the packager and tasks I'm going to present will are important for you to ease your deployment parts. JavaFX can be deployed or packaged in few formats. One of them is a standalone program, as you know, the standard jar file, which can be clicked and the program will run automatically. JavaFX as a standalone program can be also packed in a native bundle, which means that the packager will create an executable file for you, and it will behave like typical installer, like natural installer on that appropriate platform By platform, I mean on Windows, Linux, or on Mac. The deployment can create also a web start file for you. You don't have to do it manually. Web start is this JNLP file that can be linked on your web page for download or immediately run by the user. The packager can also create applet, including a sample web page, or it can embed this applet into your own web project, let's say, so it can be immediately seen in the context of your web page. It's good for testing, I would say, because it helps you to ease the testing, to see immediately the results of your deployment and your application in the place where it will be finally deployed. Yeah, desktop shortcut is just a feature of the standalone program that can create a shortcut for you automatically. This slide summarizes the features of the 4 deployment modes I have just described. Not all those features are available for all deployment or execution modes. You can see that for example, the preloader is available everywhere. I will talk about preloader a bit later, but for example, communication with JavaScript is obviously not available in applications that are not embedded in a web page. Yeah, as I said, the experience the user gets at the start of the application is very important, and preloader can help you to make this experience better. Preloader is a small JavaFX program that runs while your main application is loading or downloading from the internet, because it's boring when you click something and nothing happens. Which happens, this can happen with JavaFX program because they can be very large in terms of megabytes, and it can take a few seconds to load them and initialize them and do the stuff that you need that needed to be done before the application starts. So preloader is a simple application that loads quite quickly and can show the user what's going on. Yeah, this is what I said. The startup sequence of a preloader when used with a JavaFX application is that the splash screen is displayed just at the beginning of the application, showing the user that something's going on. The splash screen can be animated and the progress can be seen there, and the preloader can communicate with the application to see what is the state of the initialization. This is summarized here. You can see on the right hand side the application. The upper 2 boxes don't communicate with the user at all, while the preloader can show some progress dialog or the progress UI control to notify the user that the application is running and preparing for start. You don't need to write the preloader yourself, and even though you can customize the look and feel of the preloader by simple CSS style. CSS styles can be used in JavaFX applications for customizing the style, the look and feel of the application quite everywhere, including the preloader. So this is an example of how you can change the color and the text in the preloader just using the CSS style. You don't need to compile anything. You just specify this style sheet in the application, and the preloader will automatically pick it up and behave accordingly. To use your modification to the preloader, you can use, for example, an untask with these parameters, and the deployment will be done automatically using your style sheet. You can of course write your own preloader. And this is an example of such a preloader. You can see that it extends a preloader class which is distributed with JavaFX, and you just overwrite whatever you need to change and use this preloader with your application to give your user the experience you want to. Now we come to the packaging tools that comes with JavaFX. First of all, there is several approaches you can use to launch the packaging. You can use a simple command line application, which is useful in some testing scenarios, I can imagine. You can use unscripts, and you can use your IDE. All those three possibilities can be handy in some cases, and all those three possibilities are supported by JavaFX. All those three possibilities can result in any of these four instances of the deployment package, and they can be configured similarly to get what you want. Okay, this is what I talked about. We have Ant-tasks, NetBeans IDE support, and the command line tool. To create a deployment package, there is several steps that can and must be done. First of all, we can compile the CSS files in the application to a binary form. This is important for the experience of the user because the compilation on runtime can take some time, but when it is precompiled to the BSS format, it's much faster and better for the experience from the program. After this compilation, the tools will create a jar file for you, and if you want, you can sign that jar if you needed higher privileges for the program. And the last final step would be to generate files for web deployment, the JNLP file or the applet, including the applet in your custom web page. This table summarizes the steps and the tools used for deployment. You can see that we have Ant-tasks for all the steps according similar command line tools, and in NetBeans how you can access those steps in the user interface. Now I will show you a few examples of all these steps in both command line and the Ant-tasks. First of all, the CSS conversion. The loading of the binary format of the CSS is similar to the textual format, and it can use this line in the program. The Ant-tasks just takes as a parameter the file that you want to compile into the binary format, and outputs it into the output there. And in the command line, it's quite similar. The parameters are the same. The jar file that is created by the deployment contains the information for the application to be run correctly. It can specify the version of the VM it needs to be run. It contains the optional VM arguments for the virtual machine. For example, if you need to change some parameters like the heap size and stuff like that. The jar also contains application details like the name of the application or the name of its vendor, some contact information and stuff like that. It can specify the application resources, for example, when they are located somewhere on the internet or in another jar file. Of course, it contains class files, and also it can list another jar files that are needed for the application. To create such a jar file, we have prepared an fx colon jar and tasks. It helps you with that, and this is an example of this of the usage of such an and task. You can see that the information about the application are set in the fx application tag. The resources can be specified in fx resources, and another information needed for creation of the jar file can be set as well. In the command line, it's similar. In this example, not all parameters are used. It's not needed to use all of them. The mandatory parameters are here. The signing of the jar file is it's pretty similar to what you would do with a regular Java application. You need to sign the jar if you needed some features of Java that are not available for unsigned applications. This is for security, and I would say it annoys the user with some additional dialog boxes. So if you don't need signing, it's better to live without it. JavaFX comes with new way to sign the applications. This is the second point. The jar can be signed as a whole, and you don't need to sign one class file, each class file separately. This parameters about the key stores and passwords and the input file. You can see that the jar file got signed with the signature inside the manifest. Yeah, the ant file for creating web deployment files can look like this. You can see that the fx deploy command is quite nice, and it doesn't need that many information, and this can help your experience with JavaFX, because you don't need to write these tasks yourself. Yeah. So this was about deployment. Another thing that is important for your users, if you are developing a JavaFX library, for example, is to give them nice documentation. Documentation is important because without it, they wouldn't use your library. And since JavaFX has a concept of properties, it's quite boring to write the documentation for properties, because you have not only a property with the documentation, but you have also a setter, getter, and a method that gets the property. Not the value of the property, but the property. And you would need to copy the documentation to all those 4 places, and it would be almost the same. That's why we created an extension to the standard SDK Doclet, which is helping you in a way that it copies the documentation from the property into the place of its doclet, of its getter and setter and the property method. So this way you write the documentation only once, and in the final HTML page with the documentation, it is copied on 3 places, and it's all linked together, so the user can get easily from the getter to the setter, or to the method to the property itself. The doclet is available in SDK, in standard JDK now, in fact. You just need to pass a JavaFX command line argument to the doclet, and it will automatically use these features and copy the documentation from one place to 3 or 4 other places. The properties, they look like this. You can see that the documentation would be on 3 places, and you would need to maintain it on 3 places. With the features of this doclet, you can write the documentation only once, and it will be automatically copied in front of the setter and getter. Of course, not in your source codes, but only in the resulting web page. Yeah, this is how it looks like in a real example. You can see this is a real code from JavaFX framework, and you can see that the documentation about the rate property of an animation, it's quite long, and it is only once in the source code. But in the resulting web page with the documentation for the rate property, it's with the rate. The rate documentation is automatically linked to the getter and setter, and you can simply click and go to the setter, and you can see the copied documentation even with some automatically generated sentences at the beginning of the documentation, like the sentence that says gets the value of the property rate or sets the value of the property rate. Then there is a special paragraph with the copied documentation. This can be useful to ease your development and especially documenting your code. The doclet is used as a standard JDK doclet, with the only exception that you need to specify the parameter to the doclet. In a newer versions of the JDK, the simple command line parameter JavaFX is enough. In older version, in JDK 7, which is the version that's now available to the public, you need to specify system property JavaFX javadoc as it is shown on the slide. In JDK 8, this is no longer needed, and a simple JavaFX switch is enough. This is a summary slide about the presentation. I have talked about JavaFX in general. I hope you liked it, and I hope you will try it in your projects, because it can really makes your life easier while writing graphically rich applications. And there is a huge ecosystem around JavaFX. There are tools that helps you design your applications. We have forums and mailing lists where you can ask questions and even participate on the development of JavaFX. There are links later in this presentation. About the deployment, we have described the execution modes of JavaFX application. That was the simple jar file, the web deployment, which means JNLP and applet, and the native self-contained bundle, which included the JVM besides the application itself. We have covered 3 ways how to use these tools. It was the command line, the ant task, and the NetBeans IDE. I can show you perhaps in the NetBeans where the parameters about JavaFX deployment can be set. It's quite logically in the project properties, and here you can set few parameters about the deployment of a JavaFX program. It roughly corresponds to the parameters of in the command line and the ant tasks. Yeah, effective documentation was the last few minutes of the presentation. You can use the doclet that comes with the JDK to ease your life with developing JavaFX applications. Here are a few links about JavaFX and the deployment. JavaFX.com is maybe a better starting point and easier to remember. Yeah, that's pretty much it from my side. If you have some question, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the question was about Swing and JavaFX interoperability or cooperation. There, it should work in general. There are issues with threads because JavaFX is using another thread for rendering and the animation work. So you need to be careful to update the Swing and the JavaFX part on the correct threads. There are tools for that. It's easy. It's definitely doable, but it needs to be taken care of, and you have to think about this when you are working on an application or porting from Swing to JavaFX slowly. Let's say if you are not rewriting a whole application, I can imagine this can be time consuming and it takes some time, but it works. Yes. To be honest, I don't know. I have never tried that, and I didn't seen it anywhere. I don't see a reason why it wouldn't work, but I don't know. Sorry. Mm-hmm. it was, I think, just the whole jar file, or the whole jar file is taken as a file and signed. I think all the classes together inside the jar file are signed as a whole, as a bunch. Yeah. It's concatenated. The classes are concatenated and signed. Do you mean in the WebView component? It's based on WebKit browser, or the engine is based on WebKit. I'm not sure which JavaScript engine is used in WebKit, but it will be the same. I would say we definitely don't have JavaScript interpreter in JavaFX, so the interpreter of WebKit is used, I would say, but I am not sure which one it is. I don't think so. To be honest, I don't think so. I think we will stick with WebKit, and if WebKit will update, we will have its newest version, but it depends on the WebKit project. Yeah, I think it should work. You can definitely use media streaming inside JavaFX itself. I don't know if it would work in WebView. You can perhaps do some overlay on the web page, but it's you need to take care to not cycle. Yeah, go ahead. There are plans to develop a Maven plugin for JavaFX, but it was not yet. I don't think it was even started, this effort, but it's planned. Sorry, not yet ready. I don't know if there are any third-party tools, but this command line API is available, and it's technically perfectly possible to create a Maven plugin for it using these tools. But I don't know of any. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your time and for coming. Thank you.